Week of football has passed, and it's another week with brutal injuries, both in the NFL and college football. We're going to look ahead to what looks like on paper to be a tremendous week of college football. And have we seen the end of the Nick Saban dynasty at the University of Alabama? We're going to talk about all that and more coming up next on the Draft Countdown podcast. Hold on. Sorry for the delay, everybody. I think I clicked the wrong background here.
Sorry, we're here in spirits as we go through for the start of this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube,
there we go.
We're on screen now. We're on screen.
All right. Now. Sorry about that, everybody. I had clicked the wrong overlay. Everyone, welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. I'm your co-host Brian Bosshorst, joined always by my co-host Shane P. Hallam. Shane, we are 217 days, 22 hours, 57 minutes, and 48 seconds away from the 2024 NFL Draft.
We are kind of a dud college week to me in many ways, but this upcoming week is tacked with a bunch of games we'll be talking about, so I'm excited.
Yeah. A dud in some ways, yes. For everyone, if you're watching live in the chat and you have a draft question or a football question in general, ask it in the chat. You can also ask it on Twitter at Draft Countdown. Or if you're a member of our Discord, you can go to there and ask us as well. If you're not a member of our Discord, please go to draftcountdown.com, the top right corner of the search bar, and there's a link to join the Discord there. And we ask everybody, if you are new to the channel, please like the videos, subscribe to our channel, and be notified of whenever we go live with these shows. Shane, it was a dud week for the most part, but some brutal injuries and some not as brutal, but still bad, both in the NFL and college football. I guess we got to start with Monday night, the game. I know you were watching, Shane, and I was not watching at the time, and Twitter told me that they're not showing the replays of the Nick Chubb injury, but I did seek it out just because I felt like I had to see it. And it was every bit as bad as everybody described it to be.
Yeah, and it sucks for Nick Chubb. I mean, he's been one of the best running backs in the NFL since coming into the league, and we know from a draft perspective, I mean, he had that knee, had an ACL injury previously, tore up. It's the exact same knee. So we'll see what the prognosis is. I'm still hoping maybe it's a little bit better and he'll be able to come back and play again and be back to full strength in a year. But yeah, it looked pretty brutal out there, unfortunately.
He was placed on full injury reserve today, so his season is over. When I saw the video, it eerily reminded me of Marcus Lattimore in college against Tennessee, where he was planted and a defender came in from the other side and hit his knee, and the leg didn't move, but the knee did. And I don't know if the same damage happened, but Marcus Lattimore's kneecap dislocated, and when it did, it basically shredded every ligament that you can have in the knee. And he never really played a useful down of football ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully we are 10 years in the future. Medicine's come a long way since then. Marcus Lattimore probably would have come back if had that happened today. So I'll keep holding that hope.
Yeah. There was some other injuries in college football I want to talk about. One that just came across today that kind of took me aback a little bit. LSU defensive back Greg Brooks Jr. had a large brain tumor removed. And I mean, we don't know much more other than that, but hopefully, I mean, you hope for the best here for a full recovery for Brooks.
Yeah, hopefully a full recovery, and there's nothing more, to it. But it can be a difficult recovery. But if there's nothing cancerous, anything like that, it's something he could definitely recover from. Luckily they caught it before anything worse happens. So hopefully we'll see him again.
Yeah, Brooks was definitely a draftable prospect in this year's class. One of the top offensive tackle prospects in this year's class is Georgia's Amarius Mims. He got rolled up on in the first half against South Carolina, a little friendly fire there, I believe, and bad ankle injury for him. Their timetable looks to be 4 to 6 weeks for Mims, so we will see him again this season in all likelihood.
Yeah, I know there was some discussion of ankle surgery. It's probably going to have to happen on him, but like you said, hopefully he can come back and be good to go. But definitely, that's a big loss for Georgia offensive line. He was playing really well this year. I still put him fairly high in my mock draft this week, just assuming that he'll be back to full health.
Yeah, definitely competing in that offensive tackle 3 range. Some had him higher than Joe Alt. I know like Dane Brugler and those guys were really high on Mims. I don't know if he was a draftable quarterback prospect, but former Texas quarterback transferred to Florida Atlantic, Casey Thompson, tore his ACL this past weekend. He's done for the year.
Yeah, and he's definitely one of those guys who needed everything to go right, probably to get drafted. Yeah, and so that just always sucks.
And final injury we'll talk about, South Carolina wide receiver Juice Wells had been banged up coming into the game. Looked fine on the catch and run there for the touchdown in the first half against Georgia, but he turns out he had a broken bone in his foot, had a screw basically holding the foot together and re-injured that. Beamer said Shane Beamer said he doesn't think it's a season-ending injury. But if you've already had a screw holding your bone foot together, it doesn't sound promising, right?
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. I'm interested to learn some more because he's such a dynamic player last year for you guys in South Carolina.
I can't see. I don't know. I can't see him playing again this season. With that, my question becomes: does he come back? In another year? I think he's only a 4th-year player, so he would have probably another year to stay. Well, I guess we'll see on that. But just anybody else get hurt that I missed?
No, I think that's the big ones at least. There's definitely been some NFL smaller injuries and college football smaller injuries, but it's always tough. I wish we could just turn injuries off. I wish that would be an option like it is in the video games. Yeah.
We did have a massive trade today, Shane. Massive.
Yeah.
The Rams traded running back Cam Akers to Minnesota, and what may be the biggest bag of balls ham sandwich trade I've ever seen. The 2 teams swapped conditional late round picks in the 2026 NFL draft.
Yeah, basically it means it's probably not going to be anything. If they're, I don't know, we don't know what the conditions are as the time we're recording this, but they're probably not anything obtainable. Like it's probably just get him off the books, take the salary. I mean, the Rams he was inactive last week. He was inactive for multiple games a year ago. Sean McVay obviously has had enough of Cam Akers, Kyron Williams, the old Notre Dame running backs kind of taken over there. So I think it's good for the Viking. Like I'll do that deal all day. I mean, he 2020 as a rookie, he's a very talented player, second round pick, almost top 50 pick. I think he's picked 52. So yeah, Alexander Madison's been pretty awful, and Cam Akers was pretty bad last year too. But hopefully, maybe with both, maybe you can find something to get going there. The Vikings have the least rushing yards through 2 weeks in the NFL.
There is a relationship there with Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, correct?
Right. Yep. O'Connell was there with the Rams. So
week 2 of the NFL in the books. At least one of our teams is 1-1 there, Shane. I can't say the same for the Bengals now. 0-2 again for the second consecutive year. But we kind of have to start, if we're going to talk about the NFL, we kind of have to start with the Bears here, right? This team is in a complete shambles right now.
Yeah, I mean the coaching criticism that's come out from quarterback Justin Fields, that's come out from kind of sources around the league that basically, Luke Getsy and the entire Matt Eberflus and the entire Bears coaching staff is pretty, that just doesn't know what's happening. And then, we have what kind of happened today that isn't really fully fleshed out. The defensive coordinator resigned, and I'm not going to speculate since we don't have exact details on that yet, but it might be some pretty bad things on top. It's just like, it's going to be a mess there in Chicago.
Yeah, rumors of FBI raids and such. I have no idea. I don't even know what the rumors are. Okay. I'm going to ask you after the episode because I kind of.
When you hear FBI raids, you can take a guess as to what it is. And everything's always kind of speculative, and there's been confirmation and the opposite on both sides. So either way, the Bears are not in a good spot, and they also don't own, and they also are a team that, traded up to get Fields, and they're not a super young team. Like it's just not a good situation, I think, for the Chicago Bears in terms of what their future outlook looks like.
No, it doesn't sound good at all. Any other observations week 2 of the NFL?
I made a tweet just that when I look, I mean, this draft, I think we all know if you're listening to this podcast, right? Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 overall pick, the quarterback from USC. And looking at the teams that are 0-2, I know it's only 2 weeks, but we start looking at that draft order, right? Like my next 2024 mock draft, I'm going to do the current draft order. I've been holding out on it. But by my account, there's about 10 teams in the NFL that wouldn't take him number 1 overall. They'd probably trade the pick. And 4 of those 10 don't have any wins right now. Now, one of them doesn't have their own first-round pick, in the Houston Texans. But, the Bengals, the Chargers, 2 teams that just obviously aren't going to be number 1 overall pick bad. No. We know that's not going to happen. And the Panthers could be. They're not going to. They're not going to make that happen either.
Last thing on those teams that are 0-2 and one of those teams that could have the number 1 overall pick. The New Orleans Saints had a chance to have that number 1 overall pick potentially from the Denver Broncos and passed on it to get the 2023 first-round pick of San Francisco's. In hindsight, Shane, could that have been a tactical error by our favorite GM, Mickey Loomis?
Maybe. I don't think Denver's going to be that bad, either. But it definitely could have been a tactical error. I think it would have been nice. It would have felt good to have that Broncos number 1, first round pick. So I think it would be interesting if, say, Carolina gets the number 1 overall pick, Chicago has their first rounder. Let's say Justin Fields bounces back and plays really well. What do you do? I think that could make for some interesting NFL draft drama as well.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. All I know is if Denver ends up with the number 1 overall pick, Brian Brzee better be a hell of a player.
Better be really good, right?
He better be Aaron Donald. All right. That's enough of the NFL. Let's move on to week 3 of college football. And we, like you said, it wasn't a quality schedule of games. I didn't stay up late enough to watch Colorado State, which was the game of the week, and blew my mind when I saw that over 9 million people watched that game that kicked off at 9 p.m. Central, 10 East, kicked off at 10 Eastern, after 10 Eastern, and 9 million people watched that game. That just blows my mind. It shows you the effect of Coach Prime there with Colorado.
It definitely has been interesting to see that happen. I think the beating of TCU kind of blew things up, and I think it's pretty big that his son is the quarterback too. I'm not sure it would hold the same weight if it was, random guy transfer from Texas Tech that came in and was the quarterback of Colorado. I think seeing Shedeur Sanders playing for his dad, who an NFL Hall of Famer, I think has been super interesting. Unfortunately, they didn't play very well in that game. They should have beat the doors off Colorado State at least a little bit more, not gone to overtime. So it's not going to be my pick of the week. I think Oregon might win by 50 against Colorado this week, just to make a statement here.
Yeah, we'll see. We are going to talk about that game a little bit more in detail later. Yeah. But let's get to our best players that we watched last week. And Shane, I'll let you start on offense because it seems you're going back-to-back offensive tackle.
I didn't expect to, but I'm going with BYU offensive tackle Kingsley Suamataia, and I tweeted this. I think this was the single best game I've seen from any prospect so far this college season. Even some of the great, performances from quarterbacks and running backs. I mean, they beat Arkansas 38-31, and I think Suamataia was responsible for 2 of those touchdowns himself. They're a true freshman running back. I think it's true freshman running back. LJ Martin was starting for them, and I mean, they were pulling him from the left tackle spot. And he's just blowing guys up. There was one touchdown where he literally basically blocked 2 guys for that touchdown to happen, that rushing touchdown to happen. And almost every contact that Suamataia made was pancaking guys and pretty good technique. Just the athleticism. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. We talked about it last week. Was off the charts. I mean, you could see it plain as day on film. So if you're going to watch him, watch this game and see these seal blocks where he is creating space and creating offensive yards. I've never seen an offensive tackle have this kind of impact on a game like this.
It's wild to hear you say that.
I know. Look, I don't know. I don't know if he ends up as a top 10 pick or offensive tackle 3, but after watching this game, it's hard not to put him there.
Well, my offensive player of the week is a running back. And I talked about him a little bit last year, but South Alabama running back with Damian Webb, only 5'7", but he's a stocky 5'7". He's like 205, 207, 210, something like that. He's a little short, compact, well-built runner, but he's got some explosive speed, and he showed that against Oklahoma State. And what was a complete beatdown. South Alabama goes on the road to Stillwater, beats Oklahoma State 33-7 in a game that was never in doubt at any point in this football game. They were the better team, dominant from bell to bell. Webb had a 65-yard touchdown run in the second half, 18 carries for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns in the win with Damian Webb, South Alabama.
Big win. I mean, huge win for that program. Right. I mean, is this like a difference-making win? Is there something you can think about for South Alabama that's been similar? Because I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're in Mobile. I don't think this was a team that people expected to be, one of the better best South Alabama teams they've had in the past decade.
Actually, no. They did come into this season with bigger expectations because they won 10 games a year ago. Basically, it was. They're contenders. They'll have a big conference game coming up in 2 weeks. They'll play James Madison on the road. And so that might be the true test. But I would not be surprised at this point. You know, they had the loss to Tulane in week 1 that wasn't great. But if they can run the table, don't be surprised if they're not in contention for the New Year's Six bowl spot from the group of 5. If they can run the table,
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's a big if. But if they can happen, they're a very good team. A lot of talent on that team.
Yeah.
Who's your defensive player this week, Shane?
Another guy that wasn't maybe big on the stat sheet. I feel like defensively I've had a lot of those where it's not necessarily stat sheet guys, but Cedric Gray, linebacker for North Carolina against Minnesota in a game where they took Minnesota to the woodshed. 7 tackles on the game, but he played in so many different roles. Gray, I think he could play inside backer. I think he could play weak side or strong side. They had him blitzing the quarterback, get a QB hurry, drop him back into zone coverage. Man-to-man coverage on Brevin Spanford, which is not an easy task for a linebacker to cover that tight end. Maybe a top 100 tight end in this class. Broke up a pass in coverage. And Cedric Gray, I mean, a very great wrap-up closing tackler. So very impressive on the mental side as well. So, he's not a name that I think it's getting talked about a lot, but has an outside shot, I think, to be linebacker 1 in this class.
I think he had a sack and a half against South Carolina as well in the opener.
Yeah, played well in that game.
Yeah, played very well. So that's 2 out of 3 games where he's stood out that we've seen. So Cedric Gray, name to watch going forward. My defensive player of the week was a guy we didn't even have on the watch list before this week. He is now. Because he is draft eligible. I didn't know that. He's a third year player at South Carolina, defensive lineman TJ Sanders, former 4-star player, did most of this in the first half against Georgia, but 9 tackles overall in the game from the interior, 8 solo tackles as an interior defensive lineman in this game. 6 of those came in the first half. He had 6 tackles all solo in the first half. 2 tackles for loss, had a sack and a pass deflection in this game. Like I said, obviously, he, along with the rest of the South Carolina defense, just started getting leaned on in the second half by those big Georgia linemen and kind of got wore out because the offense couldn't stay on the field long enough to give them a breather. But Sanders, a eye-opening game and a game to put him firmly on the radar.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm interested to see if he keeps playing well, and you will obviously be watching the South Carolina games as a fan. If he's someone that maybe props up, South Carolina's had some good defensive linemen come out the past couple of years. So.
Yeah, they have. I mean, Tonka Hemingway and Alex Huntley were the 2 that we all knew about coming into this season, and but Sanders has kind of emerged as that third guy, and maybe even surpasses them as starts getting more in the rotation, more snaps. We'll see. I don't even know what his snap count was in the game the other day for him to get this amount of play. So let's move on now to week 4 of college football. And we mentioned that this was a big week. 7 games this week matched teams that are ranked in the top 25. We're going to talk in depth about 4 of them. The 3 that we are not watching are Florida State and Clemson, or not, watching, or not. We're not going to talk about it. Florida State and Clemson, UCLA and Utah, and Iowa Penn State. All 3 of those games involving top 25 matchups. Quickly, Shane, anything that you want to talk about from those games?
I mean, I'm excited to watch those games too. I'm sure I will be tuned in before the podcast next week on those. I'm excited for Florida State Clemson because I think that's going to be a big determining factor in the ACC. So I'll be interested in all those.
I have a rooting interest in that game. Or a rooting against interest, I should say.
Fair.
But let's get to the 8 games we are watching this week, Shane. Starting tomorrow night on ESPN, I'll be watching at 6:30 p.m. Georgia State at Coastal Carolina. A lot of talk this week, and he's not on our watch list. I want to wait until after this game. I want to watch him to see if he needs to be added. A 6-year quarterback, Georgia State, Danny Granger. I saw Emory Hunt and a few others talking about him on Twitter the other day. So I want to, see if he's worthy from this game. But the other quarterback opposite of him, I feel like we've been talking about now, Shane, for 3 full years on this podcast. Grayson McCall, the quarterback from Coastal Carolina. Is he an NFL quarterback? I don't know. I think Sam Pinckney, his wide receiver, is an NFL wide receiver, though.
Yeah, look, Granger's been great for my college fantasy team. So either way, I'm hoping for a big game here from him. You mentioned McCall. I think the running backs for Coastal Carolina are all pretty good and going to make camps. Braden Bennett, and Reese White specifically are kind of two of the best from Coastal Carolina and have been for a couple years running the football for them. So it's going to be good. That Coastal Carolina system, though, is always tough to assess.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, you say that. I am curious. They have a new head coach now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the offense has been modified at all. I have no idea. I guess I'll find out tomorrow night. Saturday at 11 a.m. And I 100% know why you chose this game on ESPN Plus, Shane. It's Cornell at Yale, and it ain't because of the Big Red. It's because of the big offensive tackle, the big interior offensive lineman from Yale, Kieran Amegaji. Anyway,
yeah.
6'4", 318, fifth-year player. Senior Bowl's been all over this guy. Jim Nagy all over this guy from the get-go.
Yeah, I actually think both Yale offensive linemen are potential draftable players. You mentioned Kieran Amegaji. He's kind of a big, moving, athletic interior lineman that can pull. And also look out for Jonathan Mendoza, their offensive tackle, 6'8", 315, is supposed to run like a 4.5, like super athletic.
Did you say 4.5?
Yeah, in the 4.5s. So, well, it's probably
6'8", 315.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a tall tale. So I will see. I'm not believing it, but there's been some talk that that he's like one of these super athletes that's just gonna rock the athleticism charts and possibly be rising up draft boards. So keep an eye out on both these guys. Yale, a team with some big uglies that might both get drafted.
There you go. 11 a.m. on Fox Sports 1. Shane, you'll be watching SMU at TCU. I feel like one of us has watched this game every year the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think so.
We saw TCU in the opener the whole world saw them in the opener against Colorado just get mollywopped in that game. But TCU has some talented players on their roster. I am curious to get your take because I know he's waited his turn at SMU, but he was really hyped up as a high school player when he committed to SMU. Preston Stone at quarterback. What's your take on him and any other player in this game?
Yeah, I've been impressed with Preston Stone so far. I mean, a good arm. I really like the zip that he has on the ball. It definitely has. He's only a third-year player. He has, and it started a little bit last year, but not too much. Has some progression to make, I think, on the mental side, but could be an NFL quarterback down the line. I think, if he stays for 5-6 years and really develops. So I'm interested to see how he does against this TCU secondary. TCU hasn't exactly reloaded, but I really like Josh Newton, their cornerback, their number one corner, physical at the line of scrimmage. He's really intriguing to me. Jared Wiley, the tight end, had a big game against Colorado and was a big force at 6'7", 255, blocking in, catching the football. So interested in those players as well.
Yeah, Savion Williams, their big wide receiver, 6'5", 214, another big wide receiver there. Marcel Brooks, I like as a linebacker. The game that literally everybody is going to watch is at 2:30 on ABC. And that's just, like I said, based off the fact that 9 million people watched the game at midnight. It's Colorado at Oregon. This game's on ABC. Probably going to do a monster number, I would imagine. We know about Shadur Sanders. Travis Hunter not going to play. He's out because of the cheap shot hit. But we'll see Shadur Sanders. Horn has been a good wide receiver for them this year. Jimmy Horn. As well as Xavier Weaver, a fifth-year wide receiver. So he does have solid targets to throw to. against Oregon. They're going to have to put up a lot of points this week, so I think Oregon's going to be out to score a lot. And Bo Nix on the biggest stage now will get a chance to convince me here. Turn me around. Get me back in the column.
I don't know what more you need from Bo Nix. He's been
right.
consistently good for
he's
now.
Been consistently good for 2
year
years
and 2
now.
games.
He has put Auburn behind him.
Yes.
That the Auburn tape is in the rear view. Jordan Birch, the South Carolina transfer, has been awful by all accounts here through 3 weeks. I don't wish ill on the kid. I hope he gets it turned around. I really thought he was becoming a better player than that. Tell me about Troy Franklin, their wide receiver. I know he is well thought of.
Troy Franklin really needs to be more on the radar, I think, of the NFL draft. A lot of people at 6'2", 180 pounds, he kind of has this bigger frame, but doesn't really have the size to match it. He's bulked up. He's fast, very productive there at Oregon. I think Troy Franklin maybe has a shot at the first round, but isn't really getting that hype. Has already started out to be pretty productive. So I think Troy Franklin's one of the best receivers in this class, high recruit, checks all the boxes.
I'm going to be writing about this game on Tuesday. What is the matchup, the biggest draft matchup I need to focus on in this game?
That's a good question, because I think the problem is Colorado doesn't have a ton of big NFL draft guys, right? Because there are a lot of transfers. We kind of mentioned, the ones that are out there. I think Jimmy Horn going up against Dante Manning and Evan Williams, the defensive backs for Oregon, is probably my favorite. You mentioned Xavier Weaver as well, depending where he lines up. I think that's going to be a good matchup, because I think both Colorado is deep at receiver, Oregon is deep in the defensive backfield, and that's going to be interesting to see if Shedeur Sanders and company can throw on them.
Is this the week we see Alton McCaskill finally?
I think he's still hurt. I think it's doubtful that he gets in the game here.
Okay. Let's move on. 2:30 on NBC. Shane, you'll be watching Maryland at Michigan State. I called a little bit of Maryland last week. Michigan State in turmoil as we speak now, as their head coach, Mel Tucker, has been fired with cause.
Yeah. So was he fired officially?
That is official. He is officially fired with cause. That happened earlier this week. So they have moved on. You can Google that, kids, as to what happened there, allegedly.
Yeah.
But who are the players for Michigan State to watch out for? I knows the linebacker Windman is a solid prospect. Anybody else?
Yeah, their linebacking group in general, I think, is good. Jacoby Windman, he was one of the players suspended for the Michigan incident last year in the tunnel, but is a good player. Cal Halliday, your other linebacker, I like a lot. Look out for Chris Bogle, too, the edge rusher, transferred. I think was a transfer in there a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty good, too. Michigan State definitely a little more bereft of talent than they have been the past couple of years when we talk about the NFL draft.
Yeah, we'll see. Nothing really stood out to me last week about Maryland. We talked about Gottlieb Yedzi, the offensive tackle. You were correct, and he is a reserve. He did get in, but not a lot. The other game that I guess will draw eyeballs at 2:30 on CBS is Mississippi at Alabama. We're going to talk about Alabama a little bit more in depth. Jalen a little bit later. Jalen Milroe back as the starting quarterback again after last week's benching and their inability to score points against South Florida.
Maybe benching. There's some rumors maybe he was actually suspended and they didn't. That was the reason. So it's a little mysterious by Nick Saban here.
We'll see.
Yeah. Or not. We'll never know.
We probably will never know. Lane Kiffin, as he tends to do, stirring the pot this week. We'll see. I really want to watch their tight end, Michael Trigg. because I know you're a big fan of his. I wish Spencer Sanders was their quarterback and not Jackson Dart. I don't know what happened there, but he is not. And Ulysses Bentley, the fourth, the running back, getting a little talk up this week in the trades.
Yeah, I mean he's getting a little bit of play. I mean Quinshon Judkins, their starters, a stud for 2025, but Bentley's getting some play. Alabama, I know they're kind of down, but I mean their defense still has some beast edge rushers. I think both Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell both are playing exceptionally. Turner playing a spot from last year, Braswell filling in the Will Anderson role in that defense, and they're both playing really well. I really like J.C. Latham, the athletic big offensive tackle for Alabama. So, I think he'll play well. And he's going to go up against Cedric Johnson, the edge rusher from Mississippi, another super athlete, 265, but electric first step. That's a matchup I'm excited about.
Yeah, right tackle is not the issue for Alabama. Left tackle is a huge issue right now. Huge issue. Right tackle is not. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about Alabama coming up. 6 p.m. on Fox. I'll be watching the Battle of the Tupac. Oregon State, Washington State, the last two members of the Pac-12 after this season.
They're gonna be playing every weekend here, I guess.
I think so. And this is a hell of a matchup. It's a top 25 matchup.
Yeah.
This week. How about the resurrection of DJ Uiagalelei this year? Go on, Shane.
No, look, I'm just saying when Kate Klubnik for Clemson also looks bad and DJU looks good now, you're like, is it Clemson? Is it Dabo Swinney and not the talent? But yeah.
People are saying.
But yeah, I mean DJU looks like he's back. He's back, and if he keeps playing like this in a year, he could be an NFL draft pick.
This is a fun quarterback matchup with him and Cam Ward from Wazoo. Looking forward to this, and I feel like I was one of the first ones to talk about edge rusher Brennan Jackson, but he is now a draftable player. It looks like coming off the edge for the Cougs. We'll see. All right, Shane, your old standby here, Notre Dame, hosting your alma mater, Ohio State, 6:30 p.m. on NBC. Everybody that is watching the 2:30 games will immediately watch this game, and it'll be a huge number on NBC with two big brands here. We've talked about Notre Dame a lot already. I feel like this is the fourth time we've talked about them in 4 weeks. So let's talk about let's focus mostly on Ohio State here. Can Notre Dame at the corner position match up with these wide receivers for the Buckeyes?
I think that's where the game's decided because Notre Dame has some good corners. Clarence Lewis, Cam Hart. Can they cover Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, true freshman Carnell Tate, Julian Fleming? Ohio State is just so deep at receiver. I think that's going to be the question, and really comes down to the quarterback play. And we've seen every Ryan Day quarterback become a first-round pick. Quarterback Kyle McCord, officially the full-time starter now for Ohio State, has not looked that way so far. So, that's going to be a question is if he can get the ball to those receivers. But, I mean, I think Harrison and Egbuka both are first-round picks and maybe the top two receivers drafted in the 2024 NFL draft.
Is this the Sam Hartman is an NFL prospect statement game for you?
I don't know. Even if he plays out of his mind, beats Ohio State by 3 touchdowns, I don't know if that does it. I don't know if there's a way his arm's not going to get stronger per se. And, but I've said that about a lot of guys who then get, Kenny Pickett was a player where I was like, he can't really do anything to get drafted highly and ends up a first round pick. So maybe this is it. The Ohio State defense has some really good pass rushers and some safeties. So he's going to have to play his top game, I think, to beat them.
So there you go. That's going to do it for our Week 4 college football preview. Some fun games to watch for sure this weekend. All right, let's try to actually make people money this week, Shane. We both lost this by some garbage points. None worse than me when Brian Ferentz trying to help himself out here, punches in a garbage touchdown with 30 seconds left to give Iowa the cover against Western Michigan. I don't want to talk about that anymore, but we're both 2-2 now. And that leads me back to old tried and true, Shane. I'm going back to the well. The Jacksonville State Gamecocks have played 3 games this year, Shane.
Yeah.
And they've covered them all.
All right.
They're at home this week against Eastern Michigan and a 6.5-point favorite. Give me Jack State and Rich Rod to cover 6.5.
Rich Rod just making you money over there. Look, I'm going big. I'm going big numbers. I've watched Georgia now against your South Carolina Gamecocks against through this whole season. I don't think Georgia is as good as the national perception has them. I'm taking UAB on the road at Georgia plus 41.5. Jermaine Brown, their running back, their quarterback Jacob Zeno. I think there's some offense for UAB. I think they can score a couple points, maybe a garbage time touchdown for a backdoor cover, and be within 40 points of the Georgia Bulldogs.
That is a lot of confidence in over his head coach Trent Dilfer there.
All right, look. I'm not saying Trent Dilfer is going to be the reason, but all he's got to do is just hands back, let the offense score 21 points, and I don't think Georgia's getting to 60 in this game.
There you go. Dejon Edwards can't score that many by himself, I guess. So UAB plus 41.5 at Georgia is Shane's lock of the week. I go with Jacksonville State at home, a 6.5-point favorite against Eastern Michigan. So that's fingers crossed we make money this week on those. I want to talk about Alabama a little bit more in depth because someone posed the question earlier this week on Twitter. Have we seen the end of the Nick Saban dynasty here? And there's a lot of factors in here that could play into this. But have we seen the end of Alabama's run as a prominent dominance of college football?
I think it's a complex question. I think we have seen the end of this dynasty, if that makes sense. I don't think it means that in 5 years, 10 years, Alabama can't come back and be that again. But I think in today's NIL and different college football environment with recruiting and bringing players in the transfer portal, I don't think Alabama has a leg up. Nick Saban was kind of the first in that in terms of the transfer portal and making use of it. Jameson Williams was a huge addition to that team. And what do they do? What do they do now? Jermaine Burton, who ends up not playing well, wasn't that good of a player to begin with. Tyler Buckner, played quarterback, was god awful last week and was awful at Notre Dame. Alabama and Nick Saban haven't used the transfer portal. They're still bringing in high recruits, but not so much a quarterback, and they're not developing those guys. They have kind of an old school mentality that I just don't think works in bringing young talent there. I think in the next 10 years, Alabama does not win a national championship and maybe only wins the SEC once or twice in the next decade.
Somebody had made a point about it, and I made a note to write it down. They basically said that, and I'm not even factoring NIL here because Alabama's got money. I'm not. NIL,
they have money, but they're not spending it in the way that other schools are. They're not giving those type of deals to recruits and to players to come play for Alabama, or they would have had the best transfers in every position this year, and they didn't.
My thought is, it's I think the transfer portal is the biggest factor here, not necessarily in the transfer portal out, because in the past, while Nick Saban has stockpiled these number one recruiting classes every year and just stockpiled these 5 stars on top of 5 stars on top of basically everybody on his 2 deep was either a 5-star player or a high 4-star, a blue chip prospect everywhere on the 2 deep. Well, now them cats ain't got to sit around no more. They can go out and transfer out, get an opportunity to play, and basically anywhere, and play earlier. right? So they don't have to sit around. I mean, they come in after their freshman year and like, yeah, this ain't what I thought it was going to be. I'm going to go. And I think that's, to me, the biggest problem here with and I think quarterback, maybe not necessarily quarterback development, but they're not like, they don't have the first round wide receivers on their roster now that they had for years. So the offense is kind of stagnated. Where's the Derrick Henry or the Najee Harris is at right now? They don't even really have that at running back. And that's what they were known. How many years in a row did Alabama have a running back drafted high in the top 100? I mean, is that guy on this roster right now, Shane, in your opinion? Is there a top 100 running back on this roster?
No, and the only ones that are haven't played, right? True freshman Justice Haynes, but Jace McClellan clearly isn't that guy. When Roydell Williams outplays him this past week, they don't have it. They don't have a top 100 receiver. They brought in Malik Benson from JUCO. It's really fast, and they barely used them. All the 5-star recruit receivers they have aren't good, and the ones that were decent, like JoJo Earl, transferred out. So I think it's difficult to keep that consistency. Like you said, he almost built this to gel as units, when you get the chance, and that's gone. I mean, that can't happen anymore with the transfer portal.
And it almost seemed like every quarterback there was next man up. We always have another guy ready to go. I mean, you went from Jalen Hurts to Tua to Mac Jones to Bryce Young, and now it's like, who's that next guy, to the point that, and you bring in Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator. This feels like a mistake. Notre Dame fans were happy to see him go.
Yeah,
and he brings along his quarterback, Tyler Buckner, who is, like I said, if South Carolina had more than 5 players on defense in the Gator Bowl, he's damn sure not the Gator Bowl MVP, and they're not winning that game. So,
and then to bring in Tommy Rees and then Jalen Milrose, the starter, who should be running the football. I mean, this should be a new age offense, and it's just not. And that's something that I think if they can't do that, it's going to be really difficult to succeed. I mean, the offense looks like a mid-tier SEC offense, and that's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, it took you 3.5 quarters to put away South Florida. I don't care that the weather was awful that whole game. It doesn't matter. The old Alabama teams would not have played that game that close. And they got just beat up by Texas. That wasn't just a close loss. They got physically beat up in that football game, which is not something you could say about Alabama teams of the past.
Now, look, I'll say Nick Saban, I still think he's a great coach. I still think he has the ability to pull this together and win a bunch of games this year and put a ton of egg on my face and our faces after this. There's no other coach I would want in the country than Nick Saban still to this day. I think he's the best coach in the country. But you have to figure out how to make this work. Look at what Lincoln Riley's doing at USC. You have Caleb Williams, and we recruited Malachi Nelson to sit for a year and go in. And he's going in, and we're actually getting him to that point before it happens, right? I think you have to have that plan, and then it just doesn't seem like Alabama has that plan to develop young players.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a Sith transfer of power here, for the Star Wars reference, from Nick Saban, Sith Lord, over to Kirby Smart. And now he seems like the new guy running the show in college football. Maybe not to this extent, but it seems like Clemson also having these similar issues with the way they've handled things, as Dabo's even more hard-headed about the whole deal than Saban is. But I just don't hate that.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's finding someone to run the offense. Right? I mean, they brought in Garrett Riley at Clemson to bring the new age TCU offense, and it's not, if you don't have an original, a head coach with that offensive mind that can be creative, then you better have an offensive coordinator that can do it. And if you do, they're going to be gone for head coaching jobs. So you better be able to keep keep that going. I think it's so hard to do in
keep
college
it
football.
churning. Yeah. That seems to be Saban's problem. He's finally run out of offensive coordinators that can become head coaches.
Right.
We saw it with Kiffin. We saw it with Sarkisian. Bill O'Brien to a lesser extent, I guess. And now he's got Tommy Rees.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll revisit this when Alabama's a playoff team later in the year, and oops. Anyway, so that's going to do it for that. One last thing I want to talk about. We don't have to talk about this very long, but the word on the street is this week that the two spring leagues, the XFL headed up by The Rock and the USFL headed up by a group of TV networks, seem to be headed for a merger. Is this good, bad, indifferent?
Mostly indifferent. I mean, I think it's good just to consolidate talent.
Yeah,
but
it should help the survival, I would imagine, of this.
Right. Yeah, to not be kind of out on your own. So we'll see. I've enjoyed watching both. I think both have had an entertaining product this past year. So maybe this gets some more publicity there.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a good thing. I guess we'll see. I'm with you. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I want one of these leagues. I wanted one of them to survive because we desperately need something like this to develop players. But we'll see if this makes a hill of beans, I guess. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it. Let's answer some questions, of which we have one. Good buddy Sal over on Twitter asks, this question is for both of you. Who is your quarterback 3 in this year's class and why? Also, which one of that group of quarterbacks after the first 2 do you just not see it happening in the NFL? The second part's a very loaded question. Obviously, I think we're pretty solidified. Quarterback 1 is Caleb Williams. Quarterback 2 is Drake May. I think we're pretty good in saying that. So who is your current QB3 at the moment? And we'll get to the second question later.
For me, it's Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix has proven himself last year, be consistent in an offense that a lot of NFL teams are running. He's actually more of a runner than Caleb Williams is, which I think would surprise a lot of people. But Bo Nix had a decent chunk of rushing yards last season. Started off with a bang this year. I think if he has a big game against Colorado, like we said, I think then the national media will start to be like, oh, maybe this isn't the Auburn Bo Nix anymore. I think it's tough to swallow, but he's legitimately extremely accurate with the football, good footwork. It seems to go through progressions much better than I ever saw him do at Auburn. I think he's legitimate, and really for me right now, Quinn Ewers from Texas is probably the only other one in that conversation for me.
I don't currently have Quinn Ewers on my quarterback rankings, so I've never actually officially watched a game of his. So until I do that, I don't put a player on my rankings. So that's why Quinn Ewers isn't currently in the conversation for me. Currently, my number 3 quarterback is Bo Nix. And that is a very tough pill for me to swallow because I don't think many draft analysts have been as critical of Bo Nix as I have over the past 2+ years. So, but he is probably the 3rd best quarterback in this class. I think Riley Leonard of Duke could get there at some point. I like Jordan Travis, but he's got some issues. And I also like Michael Penix, but he also has some issues. His second part of that question was, which of the next group of quarterbacks do you let's rephrase this because I think I get what he's trying to say is, who is the quarterback that's getting hyped up to QB3 levels in this class that you just don't see it, Shane?
I mean, if I had to pick one that I don't think could make me look really bad, I think it's Michael Penix, the quarterback from Washington, who I think is going to get QB3 hype. I mean, he's thrown for 12 touchdowns. That Washington offense is spectacular.
Dynamic.
I mean, both Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, 2 receivers, are going to get drafted in the top 100, and their 3rd receiver, Jalen Polk, probably will be in a year. To me, I think just the style of play from Michael Penix, he can't move in the pocket, ton of injury history. A lot of the throws, are really predicated before the snap, throw it down the field, or it's very soft, short passes, screens, short slants. To me, that's a lot harder of a transition to the NFL. Maybe I look bad. If he does this all year, what he's done the first 3 games, then someone's going to draft him, I think, way too high. But I just don't think that style is going to work in today's NFL as a statue starting quarterback. I think it's really hard to make work. And I think a lot of times he wants to run. He wants to be a modern quarterback and just doesn't have that skill set in him, in my opinion.
3 things that I have in my notes working against Michael Penix are age. I think he's probably going to be like an age 24 quarterback. As a rookie, he's a 6th-year player. The injury history, and he's left-handed. Those are my 3 negatives I have against him. I just have a thing against left-handed quarterbacks. It just makes for a bad evaluation for me. I'm going to say quarterbacks get hyped up as potential QB3 that I have yet to see it. And I know you've talked about it as well, Shane. Michigan's J.J. McCarthy is not a quarterback I am currently on board with for reasons. Jordan Travis, again, I love Jordan Travis as a prospect, as a player. I really do. But injuries with him as well has to be – I think he's going to have some – his injury history is going to get leaked out after the draft, and it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think McCarthy threw 3 picks against Bowling Green here. Not all his fault, but he only threw 13 passes and 3 of them were interceptions. Is not great. I don't see it. I think McCarthy could get there, maybe not in this class. Neither of us mentioned Shedeur Sanders. Do you think he has a chance to be QB3 in this class?
In this class, no, because I don't think he's going to be in this class.
Sure, the quarterback in Colorado, but if he declares, if
very
he
well could be.
Yeah. If he continues playing how he is, you almost got to go. And
you got to consider it.
I'm with you. I don't think he does. I think he stays another year for his dad and wins some games and go to the Big 12 and win a lot more games than he will in the Pac-12. But he's played well so far.
Yeah. Yeah. If he continues on the arc he's on right now and declares for this draft, he's definitely in the conversation for QB3 when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
All right. So that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Draft Countdown Podcast. Any final thoughts on anything we've talked about or anything that we've got coming up?
No, I dropped 7-round mock draft this week. You can check that out at Draft Countdown. Also updated my top 100. So if you want to look at that as well, you can check that out. But I'm excited for this week college football. I think it's going to change a lot of things for the draft and a lot of opinions.
Yeah, a lot of big games this week that we're going to talk about. So that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Draft Countdown Podcast. As always, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. We would really appreciate that. Like our videos and hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live. If you listen to this on an audio platform, be it Spotify, be it Apple Podcasts, or wherever, please give us a 5-star review and share out that podcast so all your other friends and circles can be informed like you are when you listen to the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. And go to draftcountdown.com for all of your daily draft needs. I'm Brian. This is Shane. Good night, everybody.